The room was quiet, almost too quiet. A single light hung above a metal table, casting soft shadows on the walls. A man stood alone in the laboratory, staring at a screen filled with moving lines and blinking numbers. He had run this experiment many times before. Every step was the same, every setting carefully controlled. Nothing about it should have surprised him anymore. And yet, something was wrong. When no one watched the experiment, the results followed one pattern. But the moment someone observed it, even indirectly, the pattern changed. It was subtle, easy to miss, but impossible to ignore once seen. The man leaned closer to the screen, feeling a strange tension in his chest. It was not fear, not exactly, but a deep unease. As if the experiment was not reacting to machines, but to awareness itself. This was not a new idea in science. For decades, physicists had noticed strange behavior at the smallest level of reality. Particles did not act like solid objects. They behaved like waves, spreading out, existing in many places at once. But when measured, when observed, they suddenly chose a single position, as if they made a decision the moment someone looked. The man whispered to himself. Why? He knew the rules of physics did not include intention or choice. Atoms were not supposed to care about being seen. Reality was meant to exist on its own, independent of human eyes. And yet the data suggested otherwise. The screen refreshed. Another result confirmed the same strange outcome. Observation changed the behavior. At first, scientists believed it was the measuring tools causing the effect. The act of measurement required energy, and energy disturbed the system. That explanation felt safe, logical, comfortable. But over time, the question grew sharper, more difficult to ignore. What exactly counts as observation? Is it a machine recording data? Is it a human reading the result? Or is it awareness itself? The man remembered a moment from earlier that day. He had not been in the room when the experiment ran automatically. The results followed one path. Later, when he watched the same process live, the outcome shifted. Nothing else had changed. He stepped back from the table, suddenly aware of his own breathing, of his own presence in the room. The thought entered his mind quietly, but refused to leave. What if reality behaves differently when it knows it is being watched? Outside the lab, the world continued as normal. Cars moved through streets. People checked their phones. Conversations filled cafes. Everything appeared solid, stable, predictable. But beneath that surface, something strange might be happening. Something invisible, waiting for attention. The idea was unsettling. If observation changes reality at the smallest level, could it matter at larger ones? Could attention influence outcomes in ways people never noticed? The man thought about everyday life. About moments when being watched changed behavior. About how attention shapes decisions, confidence, and fear. Was the universe doing something similar? He did not believe reality depended on human minds in a simple way. That sounded too close to fantasy. And yet the evidence refused to stay silent. The observer effect was real. It appeared again and again in experiments around the world. No matter how carefully scientists tried to avoid it, observation kept leaving its mark. The man turned off the screen and stood in darkness for a moment, feeling smaller than he had that morning, but also strangely connected to something vast. A final question echoed in his thoughts, heavy and impossible to ignore. If observing changes what is observed, then what role does every observer play in the universe? And if reality responds to attention, what does that mean for the one watching this story right now? The man did not sleep well that night. His mind kept returning to the same thought. Reality had rules, but those rules seemed to bend when someone paid attention. The next morning, he returned to the lab. This time, he was not alone. Other scientists gathered around the table, curious but cautious. They began with a story many physicists already knew. An experiment so famous it had become almost legendary. The double-slit experiment. At first, it seemed simple. Particles were fired toward a screen with two narrow openings. If particles were solid objects, they should form two clear lines on the back wall. But that was not what happened. Instead, the particles behaved like waves. They spread out, passed through both openings at once, and created a soft pattern of light and dark bands. It was strange, but understandable. Waves do that. Then the scientists added detectors. They wanted to see which slit each particle passed through. The moment they tried to observe the path, the pattern changed. The waves disappeared. The particles began acting like solid objects again. Two clear lines replaced the flowing pattern. Nothing else had changed. Only observation. The room grew quiet as the data appeared on the screen. The scientists stared, not in shock, but in thoughtful silence. They had seen this before, yet it never felt normal. One of them spoke softly. It is as if the particles behave one way when left alone, and another way when watched. The idea sounded simple, almost harmless. But its meaning was not. If particles can exist in many possibilities at once, and observation forces them to choose, then reality at its core may not be fixed until it is measured. The man watched the experiment repeat again and again, each time confirming the same result. Observation did not just reveal reality. It helped shape it. Some scientists were quick to explain it away. They said measuring tools disturb particles. Light hits them, energy transfers, behavior changes. That explanation made sense. And it worked, to a point. But deeper questions remained. Why does reality appear undecided before measurement? Why does it hold multiple outcomes at once? The man noticed how uncomfortable these questions made people. Not because they were impossible, but because they challenged something basic. Humans like to believe the universe exists fully formed, solid and complete, whether anyone is looking or not. Yet these experiments suggested a quieter truth. At the smallest scale, reality behaves more like a question than an answer. The man imagined the particles waiting, not thinking, not choosing like humans do, but existing in possibility. Only when observation enters do they settle into a single outcome. As if the universe says, "Now I must decide." The scientists argued gently. Some said this was only a limit of human knowledge. Others believed it pointed to something deeper. Is reality unfinished until observed? Or is observation simply the moment humans become aware of one outcome? No one could say for sure. The man stepped away from the group and looked through the lab window. People passed by without noticing the quiet revolution happening inside. Life moved forward, steady and confident. Yet beneath it all, reality might be far less solid than it appears. The observer effect was no longer just a strange result. It was a crack in the old picture of the universe. A hint that seeing and being seen are not separate acts. And if that was true at the smallest scale, the man wondered how far upward that truth might reach. Into atoms, into brains, into thoughts. The question did not scare him anymore. It pulled him forward, towards something science alone might not be able to answer. As the days passed, the lab filled with more voices and more opinions. What began as a physics problem slowly turned into something else, something harder to measure. The man noticed the shift during long discussions late in the evening. The equations were still there, written across whiteboards. But now they were surrounded by questions. One scientist asked what it truly meant to observe something. Another wondered whether a machine counted as an observer. A third asked the question no one wanted to answer directly. Does a human mind matter? At first, most of them resisted the idea. Science had always tried to remove the human element. Experiments were designed to be objective, clean, repeatable. The universe was supposed to run like a machine, unaware of who was watching, unchanged by thoughts or attention. But the observer effect refused to stay neatly contained. Even when machines did the measuring, humans still decided what to measure. They chose when to look, what to record, what to ignore. The man listened quietly as the debates grew deeper. Some argued that consciousness had nothing to do with it. They said reality changed long before a human saw the data. Others were not so sure. They pointed out that observation was not just a physical act. It was also an act of knowing. To observe was to ask a question of the universe. And the universe seemed to answer only when asked. The man felt something shift inside him. He had entered science to understand the world, not to question his place within it. Yet here he was, faced with the possibility that the observer could never be fully removed. He thought about the word observation. In everyday life, it meant more than looking. It meant paying attention. When someone truly observes, they notice details others miss. They become involved. They change the situation simply by being present. A teacher observing a student can change how that student performs. A camera in a room can change behavior without ever moving. Attention alters outcomes, even in human systems. Why should the universe be so different? The man began reading outside his field. Philosophy, history of science, old debates about reality and mind. He discovered that these questions were not new. Thinkers long before modern physics had wondered whether reality existed independently. Some believed the world was shaped by perception. Others believed perception only revealed what was already there. For centuries, these ideas had remained abstract, interesting, but untestable. Now physics had stumbled into the same territory. Not through belief, but through data. The man felt a strange mix of excitement and discomfort. Science was no longer just describing reality. It was questioning its foundations. If observation plays a role in shaping outcomes, then humans are not just spectators. They are participants. That idea felt dangerous to some. It threatened the comfort of a distant, uncaring universe. But it also felt strangely meaningful. The man looked around the lab again. At the people arguing, thinking, doubting. All of them observers. Each question they asked shaped the experiments they designed. Each experiment shaped the answers they received. The line between discovery and creation began to blur. Late one night, as the lab emptied, the man remained behind. He stared at the dark screen where the data would soon appear, and a quiet realization formed. Science was not only studying reality, it was also revealing something about the human role within it. The observer effect was no longer just about particles and waves. It was about the relationship between knowing and being. And once that question was asked, there was no going back to the old picture of the universe. The man began to notice that the conversation had changed. It was no longer only about particles, screens, and equations. A new word appeared more often, spoken carefully, almost reluctantly. Consciousness. At first, it felt out of place in the lab. Consciousness belonged to philosophy, to psychology, maybe even to art. It was not something scientists liked to touch without clear definitions. Yet it refused to leave. Some researchers suggested that consciousness had nothing special about it. They said observation was just interaction. Energy meets matter, systems change, end of story. But others were not convinced. They pointed out something simple and troubling. Not all interactions count as observation. A rock hitting a particle does not collapse possibilities. A random noise does not ask a question. Observation seemed to involve information. And information implied awareness. The man listened as one scientist explained it in plain terms. Before observation, reality holds many possible outcomes. After observation, only one remains. Something selects. The question was not whether particles think. They clearly do not. The question was whether consciousness is the final step that turns possibility into fact. The idea felt heavy. If consciousness mattered, then it was not a side effect of the universe. It was woven into how reality behaves. The man began to reflect on his own experience. On moments outside the lab. Moments that now felt strangely relevant. When he focused deeply on a problem, solutions appeared that were invisible before. When he ignored something, it faded into the background. Attention shaped his inner world every day. Even memory worked this way. Events remembered clearly felt more real than those forgotten. As if awareness gave them weight. The man realized that consciousness does not just observe life. It organizes it. Some thinkers in the group offered a careful idea. Perhaps consciousness does not create reality, but it completes it. Reality might exist as potential, waiting for experience to give it form. This idea did not claim that the mind controls the universe. It suggested something subtler. That mind and world may arise together in each moment of experience. The man felt both resistance and wonder. Part of him wanted clear answers. Another part sensed that clarity might be impossible here. Consciousness was not like a particle that could be isolated. It was the very thing doing the isolating. The lab now felt different to him. Not just a place of measurement, but a place where reality and awareness met. Every experiment began with a question, and every question came from a conscious mind. The man thought about the viewer. Someone watching this story unfold. Someone paying attention right now. That attention was not passive. It shaped what was understood, what was felt, what was remembered. In that moment, the observer effect no longer felt distant or abstract. It felt personal. If consciousness plays a role in shaping outcomes, then ignoring it may be the greatest mistake science can make. The man looked once more at the silent equipment, machines waiting for instructions, data waiting to be seen, and he wondered whether reality itself was doing the same, not demanding belief, only waiting to be noticed. As the idea of consciousness settled into the discussion, another question followed. a question that had troubled thinkers for centuries. If observation shapes reality, what does that mean for choice? The man felt this question more deeply than the others, because it did not stay in the lab. It followed him into ordinary moments of life. Every day seemed filled with choices. What to focus on, what to ignore, what to believe. Yet science had long suggested that the universe runs on cause and effect. Atoms collide, laws unfold, outcomes follow. In such a world, free will feels like an illusion. But the observer effect complicated that picture. If reality is not fully decided until observed, then choice might exist not in controlling outcomes, but in selecting which possibilities become real. The man imagined reality as a field of options. Many paths open at once, only one becoming visible when attention arrives. This did not mean humans could choose anything they wanted. Limits still existed. Physics still mattered. But within those limits, attention seemed to guide experience. The man thought about moments when a single decision changed everything. A choice to speak or stay silent. To look closer or look away. Often, the world responded differently based on where attention went. Opportunities appeared when noticed. Meaning grew where focus stayed. Was this free will? Or just the feeling of it? Some thinkers argued that free will was an illusion created after the fact. That the brain decides first and awareness follows. Observation only tells a story about what already happened. Others believe that awareness plays a real role, not as a controller, but as a participant. The man found this idea strangely comforting. Free will did not need to be absolute to matter. It only needed to be real enough to shape experience. Perhaps humans do not stand outside the universe making commands. Perhaps they stand within it, responding, adjusting, participating. Choice, then, is not about power. It is about relationship. The observer does not force reality, but meets it at a crossing point, where possibility becomes experience. The man realized that control had always been the wrong goal. Control assumes separation, as if humans and the universe were opposing forces. But the observer effect suggested something else. A shared process. A dance between attention and outcome. This changed how the man viewed responsibility. If attention shapes experience, then what one focuses on matters deeply. Ignoring truth allows confusion to grow. Ignoring fear gives it power. Ignoring beauty lets it disappear. Free will, in this light, was not about bending reality. It was about choosing where to stand within it. As the man prepared to leave the lab that evening, he felt lighter, not heavier, less certain, but more awake. The universe no longer felt like a machine running without him. It felt like something he was already part of. And that raised one final question. If attention shapes reality, then what happens when the observer finally turns inward? The man stood still, no longer thinking about equations or experiments. His attention had shifted to something closer, something harder to avoid. He realized that the final observer was not the scientist, not the machine, not even the theory. It was the one doing the observing right now. For years, science had tried to describe the universe from the outside, as if humans were visitors looking in through a window. But the observer effect suggested that there was no window at all. Every observation happened from within reality. Every question was asked from inside the system. There was no neutral ground. The man understood that this did not mean reality was a dream, or that the mind created everything it wanted. The universe still had structure, limits, and laws. But within those laws, awareness mattered. He thought about how attention shapes a single moment. A thought noticed grows stronger. A feeling ignored fades. The same event can feel completely different depending on how it is observed. Fear can turn uncertainty into danger. Curiosity can turn it into possibility. The man saw that this was not philosophy alone. It was something everyone had experienced, often without realizing it. Life feels heavy when attention rests on what is missing. Life feels meaningful when attention rests on what is present. The observer effect, at its deepest level, was not asking people to believe something strange. It was asking them to notice something familiar. That experience is shaped by attention. That meaning is not found by accident. That awareness is never passive. The man imagined the universe as a mirror, not reflecting faces, but reflecting the quality of observation itself. A rush mind sees chaos. A quiet mind sees patterns. A curious mind sees questions instead of threats. None of these change the universe completely, but they change how the universe appears. and how one moves within it. The story did not end with an answer. Because the observer effect does not offer final certainty. It offers responsibility. If observation plays a role in shaping reality, then where attention goes truly matters. Not just in laboratories, but in conversations, in decisions, in moments that seem small. The man finally understood why the question had felt so powerful. It was not about particles choosing paths. It was about humans choosing perspectives. The observer effect does not say, "You create reality." It quietly asks, "How are you participating in it?" As the story comes to a close, the final observation is left with the viewer. You are not just watching this idea. You are engaging with it, interpreting it, giving it meaning. And in that simple act, you become part of the experiment, not as a subject, not as a controller, but as an observer. And perhaps that has been the truth all along.